So, how much money are you getting for your scrap? This business executive of a major paper processing company asked his fellow first-class passenger on the airline flight between two major cities in the U.S. The person to whom the question was asked was Harvey Mackay, who was the CEO of a paper envelope company. They make envelopes for letters and any type of mailers. And this question that this other executive asked him just really kind of struck with him and pretty much changed his view of business with his own company and for other companies. Harvey Mackay later wrote a book called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten. Outsell, outmanage, outmotivate, and outnegotiate your competition. That came out in 2005. It was the business book to read. And if you had not read that book, you had no business being in business. Huge sensation. And there was a lot of spin-offs, and I think he did some other books. But this one question, how much are you getting for your scrap? Harvey went on and explained in his book that he knew the numbers of the envelope company, and he knew that they were just kind of squeaking out a profit. Not a highly profitable business at all, but this executive that he happened to be sitting next to in first class explained that his company doesn't make any profit on the product that they actually produce, but they do make a profit off of the waste that they sell to other paper manufacturers. And so that really kind of changed Harvey's outlook, that the waste that they were, well, at the time, literally sending to a landfill was very valuable. And that was the difference between a profit and a loss. So if you come across that book, Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten, I highly recommend that you read that. Even though it's almost 20 years old, there's still a lot of really good information in there. You can find that on Amazon for about, 10 or 11 bucks for the paperback version. So I ask you, how much are you making from your scrap? Hi, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast, episode 81. Increase your profits with your scrap. I'm here to help you get your woodworking business off the ground, up and running, maybe full-time, maybe part-time. There is just such a need for people to repair furniture, to refinish furniture, to build cabinets that will fit in a specific place in someone's home. Somebody comes up with this crazy idea for, a new gadget, and they reach out to woodworkers to make the prototype, or maybe even to go into production. So I hope by listening to these episodes, you can gain a better awareness and understanding of what it takes. It's not rocket science, but it can be a bit intimidating whenever you're just starting out. So if you are buying lumber for $5, $7, $10, $15 a board foot, and you have a 20 to 30% waste factor, in other words, if you buy 100 board feet of white oak and to build a particular item, you can figure anywhere between 10 and 30% wastage. That means that just because you have a 1x6 10-foot long board, but you only need 4 1/4 inches out of that board, well, the rest of that's wastage. You're not really going to use it for anything else in that project. And it is scrap. It ends up on the floor. You have to do something with it. I generally use about a 20% wastage. It also depends on the type of wood. If there might be some defects in it and I need absolutely perfectly clear, straight grain, I might even increase that percentage a bit. So anyway, if you spend $300 on a load of lumber and you have 20 to 30% wastage, that's $60 to $90 worth of wood lying on the floor or in your scrap bin. What are you going to do with that? Well, a lot of people put it out with the trash and it's gone. Now, you have accounted for that cost in your bid on the product or the project that you're building. So it's not like that money is flushed down the drain, but it's kind of like the penny lying on the ground. You can pass it by and you would have no ill effect, or you could pick that penny up and count that as a profit. So that's what we're going to talk about here, how you can squeeze some money out of that scrap wood that we all have lying around. Now, of course, a lot of this depends on what type of lumber you use. If you're using a whole bunch of poplar that you're paying, $2 or $3 a board foot for, that's going to be different than if you're using walnut, mahogany, ebony. Ooh. So that's going to kind of change what you can do with that wood, but all waste wood, all scrap wood can be put to a good use. So number one, sell it. This is what I did for a number of years. I was working on a canoe and I had to use a whole bunch of very nice quarter sawn northern white cedar. And I had quite a bit of waste from what I had to cut off. And it was just pretty. And these turned out to be like long right triangles of wood. And I just hated to throw these away. I mean, they could be turned into a fan or some wall decoration or something. And I got the bright idea. I'm going to put these in a USPS box, take a couple pictures of them, put it up on Etsy and see if anybody would buy it. And I figured, I don't know, $1 a pound. And being northern white cedar, well, it's a pretty light wood. And yeah, this sold right away. Boom. So I got into the habit of saving my scrap and things that were, kind of rectilinear in shape. If I had to do a lot of bandsaw work, that gets cut up into tiny pieces that I didn't think anybody could really use. And I was selling these boxes full of scrap wood. Was I making money at it? I really wasn't in it to make money. I just hated to see some of this wood go to the burn pile. And I was happy that other people was able to utilize it. And actually, I was starting to make money at it. It also came with a very high annoyance factor because I wasn't smart enough to kind of systematize this process. I would be in the middle of building something that was due, yesterday, and I would get 2 or 3 orders for scrap wood. Oh, crap. And if you're on Etsy, you know that your time of process is very important. If you say you can ship this in 1 to 3 days, you really need to ship that in 1 to 3 days, or Etsy will kind of, they'll de-rank you in the search engine results, and you'll get pushed down towards the bottom, and you won't have the exposure if you are, a star seller meeting all of your deadlines. So it's really important if you're on Etsy to ship things when you say you are going to ship them. So I would have to stop what I was doing on a project I was already behind on to go ship, a stinking 5-pound box of scrap, which meant I'm out in the scrap bins digging through, pulling out enough wood to get into a box that I could ship this. And it was time consuming, especially whenever I didn't have the time to devote to that at that particular time, if you know what I mean. So if you do get into this, I would highly recommend that you have a system in place, you have bins, and that you pre-package. You know that your package is going to weigh so much. A 5-pound package, 10-pound, whatever it is, or maybe you'll sell this by volume. Go ahead and have those boxes already packaged, taped up. The only thing you need to do is to slap a label on them and ship them. You could already go ahead and put a little thank you card in there for your order and, please send me pictures of whatever you build with this. I have some great stories about people using this scrap wood. I had one lady, I think she was in North Carolina. She was getting all 7 of her grandchildren for 2 weeks during the summer. She said that she was thrilled and terrified at the same time because she wasn't sure what she was going to do with her 7 grandchildren for 2 weeks. And she wanted a jumbo box of scrap. And I think I shipped her like 30 or 40 pounds of scrap wood. And she was equipped with a hot glue gun and a little trim saw, and she was just going to put them to work. And apparently they had a wonderful time with that. So anyway, prepackage these things so that if you get an order, boom, you can turn it out, you can ship it out that same day, and it's no fuss, no muss. Maybe you'll end up having a half day sometime where you're just building these prepackaged boxes. And you're also going to have to do your homework, decide if you want to make this a free offering, with shipping, figure out wherever you live in, the U.S. or, other places, how much will it cost to ship this from one side of the country to the other side of the country. And don't take a hit on shipping. I literally lost money on some of these until I started to figure that out. What else can you do with your scrap wood? Well, you can burn it, which is really what I do with most of mine. You might have a wood stove in your shop. You might have a wood stove in your home. Perhaps you could use this in a fire pit. Nice autumn, fall evenings out there, nice fire, friends, favorite beverage, or use it in your charcoal grill. Charcoal grills can burn other things besides just charcoal. If you cook over a wood fire, boom, you already have your scrap wood. We actually use that quite a bit with ours. It's going to be really hard to burn a piece of ebony, which I don't do, but for most of the domestic hardwoods that I have, I can do that. When I burn a piece of walnut, I do cry a little bit inside. You can sell your scrap wood as firewood, specifically kindling. Somebody might get a load of firewood, but they don't want to split that out as kindling. And if you can put together a little package, a box of scrap wood that they'll give you $5 for, $10 for, they don't have to worry about kindling. They have it right there. Where are you going to sell this? I don't know. Take a ad out on Craigslist. You might be surprised. Or maybe Nextdoor. That's kind of an up-and-coming social media platform. You'd be surprised who would be more than happy to buy a box of scrap wood from you. Maybe there's kind of a boutique hardware store in your area. Not a rough and tumble, grease hardware store where workmen, tradesmen, frequent. They would probably chuckle at, someone selling scrap wood. But in a lot of cities, there's a hardware stores that kind of service the, affluent people who probably don't know how to use a screwdriver. They would absolutely buy scrap wood at a place like this. Work out a deal with the owners, and you could be in business. If you are showing at craft shows, especially this fall and winter months, have a few bundles with you, and maybe under the table. And if it comes up, you can offer these for sale. Farmers markets, that's an interesting idea. It kind of depends on the market, but I think someone could probably set up a booth and sell scrap wood there. At least you would end up with some good conversations. And we all know that the key to any sales is conversations. So you might sell 5 bundles of scrap wood and end up with 10 different jobs off of a booth at a farmer's market. Something to think about. Now, you can also get more creative with your scrap wood. Here's an idea. Make charcoal. Yeah, you can actually make charcoal. People have been making charcoal for like thousands of years. It's not rocket science, although you do have to be a little careful so that you don't blow yourself up. But check out YouTube. There are like hundreds of videos on there on how to make charcoal. And guess what they're using to make charcoal from? Yes, scrap wood. You can use your homemade charcoal for yourself. You could give it to friends and family. This would make the perfect Christmas gift. Hey, how did you like that charcoal I put in your stocking? Man, nothing says love of family like that. Or, of course, you could sell it. Same type of thing. You could set up a little side business where you're making charcoal and you're selling it. And who knows? You could do this locally. You could, I guess, put it on Etsy or Amazon or your own website and start selling bespoke charcoal in particular species. Yeah, you just never know how some things like this will play out. Now, for the really adventurous, wood gas. Yeah, I know, it's weird, but wood actually has gas in it. And this really goes right along with making charcoal, because when you're making charcoal, what you're doing is heating the wood in an absence of oxygen. If you added oxygen along with heat, you would have fire. But you're keeping the oxygen away from the wood as it's being heated, and the wood has no choice but to give up its volatile organic chemicals, VOCs. That's the gas that is coming off of that log in your fireplace. You can see the little, flames blue and orange and yellow. When you're making charcoal, those gases, you have to leave an area for those gases to escape. When you're making wood gas, you're capturing those gases. This was something that's been used throughout history. It's nothing new. At towards the end of World War II in Germany, when resources were becoming ever increasingly scarce and petroleum, gasoline, was just not available to the civilian community. There are pictures of creative people turning their truck into wood gas propelled vehicles, and they have a wood burner on the back of the truck that you light a fire in this, and that produces the wood gas, and it gets piped into the internal combustion engine. And yeah, this was a thing. I also understand that there were some rather horrendous accidents, by this. This is not something to do if you don't really understand the process and know what you're doing. This is not one of those hold my beer type projects. So if you have an interest in this, I would encourage you to check out the methane capture systems that are used in agriculture. Some very smart farmers have figured out that their cows, particularly dairy cows, which, spend a lot of time sheltered, they're flatulent and they expel methane gas. I mean, come on, they have 4 stomachs, all right? They're eating grass and, they fart a lot. And you can capture this, cow farts, and use that to run your farm, to heat buildings, to heat your home. And in essence, if you have a feed lot with all these cows in there, and you might have, there could be 100 cows, and you simply build a roof structure that has vents that the gas is accumulated, some fans to move this from one place to the other. A lot of these places will use a water recovery system where the gas goes through a water bath and then is purified and cleaned, I guess, and then captured, and then it can be pumped. But anytime that you start to pressurize things like this, really bad things can happen. So don't go into this willy-nilly. I mean, you really have to do some research and know what you're doing. Or literally, you could blow yourself up. And you'd have to do the math to figure out if this is something that would actually be sustainable, if it would be, positive output, for what you have to input into this. I could see a large wood processing facility that could be very, very, beneficial to them. On a smaller scale, this might be more of a novelty thing that could be a lot of fun to try. Speaking of burning wood, what about wood chips? For people who are into smoking meat and fish and cheese and other types of foodstuffs, smokers. You can go to the big box store and buy a bag of, pellets for your pellet smoker. You can buy loose chips of mesquite or oak or hickory that you use in a pan-style smoker. That's what I have. And there's this new thing, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's tubular smokers. These are designed for your standard grill, either charcoal or propane, that it's, kind of a long tube, maybe a foot long, maybe 2 inches in diameter made out of a perforated steel that you load up with either sawdust or pellets, and you light one end, and this thing starts to slowly burn inside the smoker or the grill, and you've turned your grill into a smoker. They've got to buy those wood chips from somebody, and it could be you. You can sell these by the pound, maybe by volume, break them down into different species. Cherry is really good for lamb and chicken and beef and vegetables, pretty much anything. I don't know if poplar would be yeah, it would be okay. You want to stay away from the softwoods, the resinous woods. I don't know if fir or pine is going to add, a very tasty flavor profile. Probably not. And what are you going to do with this? Well, you're going to sell it. This is marketing. That's the second most powerful force in the universe. And I'm sure that you could figure out how to do this. Again, a farmer's market might be a perfect place for something like this. On your Etsy store, on your own website. Yeah, there's definitely possibilities here. Okay, now here's another category. I call this glue ups. If you're ripping out 4 1/4 from that 6-inch wide rough sawn board, what are you going to do with that remaining 1 3/4 inch? If you leave your stock thick, I get most of my wood planed to 13/16. I'll go ahead and rip out my finished widths from that 13/16 stock or, thick stock. That gives me the opportunity to glue up a whole bunch of these and make a new board. And still being at full thickness, I can then plane that down and end up with a nice, smooth, finished 3/4 inch board. If you plane your raw stock first to 3/4 inch and then try to glue them up, you're going to run into some problems, because I don't care how good your glue up process is, you're still going to want to do a final plane to bring everything even. Now, this is not something that I would do with poplar. because, poplar is very inexpensive and it's just not worth your time. I do this with walnut because walnuts, well, it's pretty pricey in my area. Oh, but I want to use solid wood. Well, this is still solid wood. It just happens to be glued up solid wood. And I had a real hang up about this, using glue ups in some products that was solid wood, one piece wood. And I kind of got over it. Number one, you can do a really, really good job grain matching that literally 90% of people buying your product will never ever notice a glue line if you pay some attention to it. And even if they do notice, they won't think anything about it because they see so many glue lines in products that they're exposed to every day, their kitchen table, that they think that glue lines is just a natural form of wood. So don't beat yourself up over that. I suffered from that, and it took me a while to kind of get over myself. So I have no problems doing glue ups now and selling that as a first run. The thing that really kind of did this for me is I was gifted, as they say, several boxes of walnut plaques. These were plaques that, you are employee of the month or employee of the year, and they put your name on there. And this company was getting rid of all of these plaques from people who very long ago and gave me the wood. Everything was 3/4 of an inch, so I ran them through the planer just to take off the finish. And yes, I had the little screw holes on one side. It's free wood, okay, and it's walnut. But the thing that I noticed, every single one of these was a glue up. I mean, I couldn't find a piece of wood over 4 inches long. And most of them were like, 3/4 of an inch to, 1 inch wide, 2, 3, 4 inches long. And these were all glued up. They had used a finger bit, router bit, to do the end-to-end joints. And then the long grain to long grain was just a simple joint. But these were all glued up, stained, and then finished, so that the color was very, very even. And yeah, it looks like a wood plaque. The grain did not really show through on these. But, I mean, that should give you an idea of what you can do with some of your scrap wood. But the secret there is to rip out what you need from the thick stock and then glue up and plane down. Another category, make something out of all these little pieces of scrap you have. What could you do here? Oh, I don't know. A cutting board, a charcuterie board, checkerboard, chessboard. Maybe you can make a chessboard that's also a cutting board. That would be kind of cool. Perhaps you can turn kind of long, thin pieces into hairpins or chopsticks. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that you could do with these little pieces. Start asking people outside of your immediate circle of friends what you could do with scrap. They will come up with all kinds of things that you will never, ever have thought of. Another thing that you can do with these, and this actually came to me through one of those encounters, decorative glue-up panels. I had a lady in New York City contact me, and she wanted a panel that was like 4 feet wide, 6 foot long, made up of wood blocks. And I'll admit, kind of geezerly here, it took me a while to wrap my brain around what she wanted. So think of a dry laid stone wall where you're stacking, rocks, and these can be cut rocks that are relatively uniform in thickness, that are just stacked up with some of the blocks proud, protruding, and some even with each other. So it creates kind of this 3D effect but she wanted that out of wood. And once I figured out what she wanted, I decided I wanted nothing to do with making something like that. But it's a really interesting concept. And then I started to see these things popping up, all over the place on social media. So apparently it is a thing. You would want to do this in such a way that you could, you build like maybe a 1x2 panel, kind of like what they're doing with shingles now, wood siding shingles. You don't buy the individual pieces. You buy the panels that have been, pre-affixed to basically plywood, and then you apply that to the wall. So you could build these in sections that then could be fitted together to create, whatever size that the person wanted to, primarily for shipping convenience. So that's an idea, like I said, not something I'm going to pursue. And almost in that same vein, have you ever tried intarsia? This is a weird word that kind of gets conflated with marquetry and parquetry. Intarsia, if you look up on Wikipedia, totally gets it wrong. Intarsia is taking small pieces of wood that are shaped, that are then combined with other small pieces of shaped wood that forms an overall picture or landscape or some type of a decorative art. You've seen these, particularly in a lot of the magazines, Intarsia project in one weekend, and you use scrap wood and you make a dolphin, jumping out of the water, or a horse. It's kind of like marquetry, except with really thick wood. Marquetry is using veneer, maybe a 1/40th of an inch thick or even smaller. This is using 3/4 of an inch thick wood, and the edges are rounded and shaped to almost give almost a sculptural effect without having to hack the shape out of a solid piece of wood. So it's really neat. It's some people are just incredibly, gifted at doing this. So that might be a rabbit hole you could go down to start using some of your scrap. Or if you have unique wood scrap, you might be able to sell this to some intarsia artist. So just saying. So what could you do with intarsia? Company logos? That's an idea. You could make these as large as the company would want, or as small. Different types of wall decor, like the leaping dolphin. Sports teams, their logos. I would advise to check into their licensing program so that, you don't step on any toes. And honestly, one of the best uses with intarsia is when you used 1.5 inch screws to attach the tabletop to the base of this big conference table, and you should have used 1.25 inch screws. Yeah, tell me who hasn't been there. And now you got these screw holes, hopefully only one before you discovered your error. How are you going to fix that? It is so incredibly hard to fix a hole in something to make it totally disappear, or you can use intarsia technique or even veneer and turn it into the company's logo embedded right there in the conference table. Boom. Yeah, I thought I'd have a little design change. No charge for this. I just felt that this piece really needed this. Oh, man. That has gotten me out of so many screw-ups. You have a bunch of small pieces of wood. Maybe you could use those small pieces of wood to make small boxes. People love boxes, especially like in the craft show arena or even online. Particularly in person. People love to pick these things up and flip them open and close them and hold them in their hand. And then they start thinking about, oh, I could put this in there. I could put that in there. And there's a lot of really unique ways of making boxes that are not the standard, 4 sides, a bottom and a top, a lid, hinges. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. And that would be an excellent way of getting rid of some of your scrap. Okay, last one. Your scrap sawdust. Of course, sawdust is scrap. Whoever reuses our sawdust. What can you do with this? Well, I've put sawdust in a paper bag and threw it in the wood stove. And it burns for hours. It's absolutely amazing. The paper bag burns off, very quickly, but, can you come up with a better container for sawdust? But that sawdust will sit there and just burn and burn and burn. I don't know if you could sell it for that, but for home use, for shop use, yeah, I think that's a very viable option. Bedding. Horse owners are always looking for bedding material for horses. I guess there's a straw shortage in the country, and they will use sawdust. Kind of a caveat, you don't want to use walnut for any type of bedding. Walnut's kind of an asshole species of wood, and it doesn't play well with other living creatures. That's why they call it Walnut Grove, because they have forced out all the maples and the oaks, and, this is for walnut only. They're very, very segregationist. But there's actually a chemical in walnut that is toxic to other species and harmful to mammals and other living things. So you don't want to use walnut for bedding, particularly for horses. But other than walnut, your other species, your poplar, your oaks, things like that would be perfectly fine. And not just for horses, pets, hamsters. Your hamster could be frolicking in a bed of white oak shavings. I mean, how cool is that? We mentioned smokers. You could sell sawdust for these smokers. And here's an idea that just kind of popped into my head. Aroma therapy. Am I crazy? But think about it. Vacuum sealed pouches to lock in the freshness of the wood shop. Just like Grandpa's shop. I don't know. It could be something. I'll leave that up to you. So recommendations for this episode, explore. I threw out a whole bunch of ideas. You need to kind of sit down in your shop whenever it's nice and quiet, maybe a hot beverage or a cold beverage, and just think of what you could do with all of your scrap. And come up with a couple ideas and then go research them. See if these are viable options. Missed jobs? Yeah, a whole bunch. Can you fix my wingback chair? The leg is falling off and the fabric is torn in a couple places. Could you restore a child's rocking chair? Or I would like you to modify these bar stools. Those are just a few of the things that have come in over the last few weeks. I mean, there is a great demand for furniture repair. So if you're thinking about getting something started, I would really encourage you to seriously consider furniture repair. It's not something that you have to stay with for the rest of your life, but I think it would be a really good start. And you can learn so much about furniture by repairing other people's mistakes. Now, I do have a boy did I screw up for this episode. UPS, United Parcel Service. I made a large shadow box and installed museum glass into it. Museum glass is a very cool glass that has a film on the backside that reflects like 99.827% of UV light. So it protects whatever it's in front of from UV damage, but also it is anti-reflective. So when you look at it, it doesn't look like it has glass in it. And I've actually been using a lot of that. People really like that look. Anyway, this was a large, almost a 2x2 shadow box that I shipped, and the customer contacted me. The glass was broken. Now, the one kind of bad thing about museum glass is that it's on a single pane glass, which means it's about 1/16 of an inch thick, roughly 1 millimeter thick, and it is a bit fragile. On other projects, I use double strength glass, which is almost 1/8 of an inch thick. That stuff's actually kind of hard to break. That's your window glass. Anyway, the customer contacted me. And in any situation like this, my number one priority is the customer comfort. I don't want to put them out any more than I have to. So I reassured them I would take care of everything, I would file the claim, and I would repair the broken glass. I asked them to take some photos and then repackage the shadow box into same packaging and ship it back to me. For some reason that I don't know, the customer got their own box to ship it back to me. So I don't have the original box. And that's kind of where the problem lied. Now, I had sent the customer a return shipping label so that they didn't have to drag this thing off to the UPS store or FedEx or something like that. They can just, print out the label, emailed it, and slap it on there and drop it off, and it would get shipped. Well, this thing came back in a box that was huge. I'm kind of surprised that UPS took it because it was underpriced for the size of that box. So to kind of make a long story short, I filed the claim. It was denied because they said the original box was not available to them for inspection. The customer assured me that he would make the box available to him. I don't know what happened. Again, customer comfort. I'm not pushing the customer. This is not his problem. So, yeah, I lost the claim. What a surprise. If they find one dot, one T not crossed, boom, you're out. I even paid extra to ensure the entire value of it. Some companies carry like $100 minimum, which I've taken advantage of on a couple occasions, but I just had a feeling that this might go wrong, and it was. What would I have done differently? I would have probably added 2 or 3 layers of cardboard on top of the glass. The backside, of course, is plywood, but the top side, I just had the packaging material, and that apparently wasn't enough, particularly when one of the photos the customer sent me was of a footprint. So, imagine that. Takeaways from this story: learn what your claim policy is with the shippers that you're using, USPS, FedEx, USPS, HDL, whatever the company is. Learn what the process and the procedure is before you actually need to file a claim. Had I done this, I would have done things a little differently. I used PayPal was the third-party payment party, and they use ShipStation as their shipping coordinator. And so I had to go through PayPal to ShipStation to UPS, and things kind of got weird. I tried to file this directly with UPS, but since I hadn't actually bought the shipping label from UPS, they wanted me to use ShipStation. And I think some things kind of got lost. But I think the really important thing is to focus on the customer, make this as painless for them as possible. I know in the old days it used to be, hey, I shipped it to you. You're going to have to file claim with, No, it's not the customer's problem. They shipped it back to me. I installed a new piece of glass, kind of cleaned it up, retouched the finish in a couple places, shipped it back to them in that same box, and it arrived safely. Fine. The box, by the way, that he shipped it in, I looked it up, and it's called a fine art shipping container. This thing is like all foam with really thick, heavy cardboard on the outsides. The box cost $175. OMG, that was almost more money than what the shadow box was. So I guess if you're buying a Rembrandt, you want to invest in one of these boxes. I'll take my chances with just cardboard. Special thanks to listeners in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Eindhoven, Netherlands, and the one listener in Luxembourg. By the way, listeners in Indianapolis, I was up at the Northwest Lumber Company the other day. If you live in the Indy area and you've not been to Northwest Lumber, you really need to stop in there. Great lumber store. They have quite a few, woodworking tools for sale also, but a huge selection of all kinds of plywoods and domestic hardwoods and exotic plywoods. If you're just really hankering for a piece of ebony that's like 4 inches by 6 feet, it's running around $750, but you never know whenever you're going to need a piece like that. And if you mention that you heard about them on Working at Woodworking Podcast, maybe that could lead to a sponsorship. You know what I'm saying here? And if you'd like to support the show, you could buy me a cup of coffee or, of course, sign up for a coaching session. Maybe you're working on a project that kind of has you a little stumped, or you're really thinking about starting a business, but you have some questions and you just want to bounce them off of somebody. I would be happy to help that. Check out the website workingatwoodworking.com for more information about that. So until next episode, happy woodworking.